Puerto Rico's tax incentives have drawn a number of American entrepreneurs and investors to the island in search of tax rates as low as 0%, including some relatively well-known names. And if you like the idea of living in Puerto Rico and you are willing to make that trade-off in exchange for lower taxes, it is certainly one option that any American looking for a lower tax bill should consider. But in all my years helping people go overseas, I found that the biggest abuse people have suggested, the most times people have told me they wanted to game the system, have come around Puerto Rico. I've always pushed back on gaming the system. I always want to do things legally. And now I've got actual evidence of why you need to be very careful when you're moving to Puerto Rico for tax savings. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, I've spent over a decade traveling the world, hired a team of almost 30 people, and built a network of experts from Puerto Rico to Poland to help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs legally go where they're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, someone recently sent me a press release from the U.S. Department of Justice that they put out after the arrest and indictment of a certain Puerto Rico CPA who allegedly was helping people with some sort of scheme in relations to what used to be called Act 20 and 22 under the Puerto Rico Tax Incentive Plan. Now, I'm not going to bore you by reading you the press release. It seems to me I don't really understand what the guy did, and I always get a little suspicious with these press releases because I do wonder, just what actually was done. But whether this person did what they claim or not, it made me want to discuss with you what I've known and what I've thought for a long time about Puerto Rico's tax savings. Some of the terms of the deal have changed. They've opened up new opportunities. They've added new costs. But the bottom line is, if you are a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you can move to Puerto Rico and you can take advantage of tax rates like 0% on capital gains, 4% on income. Now, there are some caveats to that, but a lot of people can save big money, potentially even more than they would moving overseas, by living in Puerto Rico. But the catch has been that you need to actually pass 3 different tests in order to make Puerto Rico your home. And one of those tests is physical presence. And you've probably heard the number thrown around, both in terms of Puerto Rico and a lot of other countries in the offshore tax world, of 183. It's a very misunderstood number in terms of if you spend 183 days in a country, you pay tax in the country. In this case, in Puerto Rico, that's a good thing because you're getting yourself into their very low tax rates. Or if you're leaving a country, you want to spend fewer than 183 days, which does happen to be true. If you're leaving the mainland, you don't want to be spending more time in the mainland than you do in Puerto Rico. But what I've heard over the years and what I've talked people out of is the idea of, I'll just live in Puerto Rico, but then I'll get on a canoe and I'll go to some neighboring island and I'll fly from there. Or, how will they really know where I'm at? And really, we're talking about the U.S. government here. They know everything. Don't play games is what I've told people. After all, I have been called the goody two-shoes of the offshore industry, and so I want you to play it straight. I don't want you to get in trouble because it appears that this latest indictment is around people who are pretending to live in Puerto Rico but aren't. And so I've heard all kinds of schemes in recent years about, you only have to spend 90 days a year in Puerto Rico, or as long as you're not in the U.S., you don't need to spend any time in Puerto Rico. Here's my perspective. Now, some people may have different perspectives. I tend to be conservative, but I think that my perspective and the perspective of the tax professionals and the Puerto Rico professionals that we work with is one that makes sense. And that is, spend 6 months unless you want to be largely overseas, in which perhaps you could spend 5 months, okay? Less than that, I started to get concerned. Now, I'm not saying less than that perhaps in 1 year. There are a different number of ways to get to the physical presence. So it might be that you spend 4 months 1 year, but then you're spending 9 months the next year. That could potentially work. And again, I'm not giving you tax advice, but we want to be actually living in Puerto Rico is the point, okay? And so for too long, I've heard people trying to get away with something with the system. Here's the bottom line if you want to move to Puerto Rico. There are good tax savings. The rates are pretty low so long as you have a business that qualifies. Now, the caveats could be you need to actually move the operations to Puerto Rico. You need to move your life to Puerto Rico. This is not a smoke and mirrors game. You need to actually make the move. The same way that someone who's leaving Australia and moving to Dubai can't keep all their stuff in Australia. Okay, so you have to meet those criteria. The other criteria is people think sometimes they can go and they can sell things, assets like businesses they've been building up for years, the day after they land in Puerto Rico and benefit from 0% capital gains tax. That's also not true. It's a staggered approach. But I don't want you to fall for the scams of pretending that you're living there, or checking in or falsifying forms. That's just a bad idea with the U.S. government, with any government, and I think that you're going to get in trouble. So you want to make sure that you're spending, really half or close to half of your time there in the aggregate. And so I had a gentleman recently. He's dating someone who is a citizen of a country that does not have visa-free access to the United States. And the odds of her getting a tourist visa to visit the United States are mediocre at best. And so while the best strategic thing for him to do from a tax perspective, from an investment perspective, would be to move to Puerto Rico, one of the challenges is his girlfriend isn't going to be with him for that time of the year. It's probably not going to work unless they get married. Okay, and so that certainly is a perspective. If you're single and you like dating Russian women, then you're probably going to have a hard time dating Russian women while you're in Puerto Rico. And so these are all the things that need to be considered. If you're a family and you want to go and set up shop there, that could be easier. I do have families who are going down to Puerto Rico and they're putting their kids in school and they're living there 9 months of the year, and then they're going back occasionally to service parts of a different business in the U.S. or whatever. I think that certainly can work if you're willing to put in that time. But given what has happened, the government is now cracking down on people abusing the program. I've heard lots of stories. I've heard lots of bad advice. Anytime you have a program that gets billed as a sort of panacea, anytime you have something that becomes a brand name, you have people coming into the space that make it sound like it's so easy, like a magic wand. And, people fall for that sometimes. There are still people who contact me to this day saying, can I stay in Canada, form a company in Belize and not pay any tax? No, they figure that one out. Otherwise, everyone would be doing that. You can't do that, right? And so you can't go down to Puerto Rico, spend a couple days, pretend that you're there, and then check the box to actually take advantage of their tax savings. You actually have to move your life to Puerto Rico. If that's worth it, it's a great opportunity to consider. If you don't want to do that from a lifestyle perspective, then don't fall for the tricks, because I think it's not going to work. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.